Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. We're back with Michael for our weekly crypto news update and very interesting times in the market. Michael, how are you seeing everything?
Yeah, it's obviously a pretty drastic sort of sell-off at the moment. I think that's probably the main thing that everyone's probably worried about right now is exactly how low do we go? Because yeah, it's been pretty brutal for a lot of holders.
Yeah, I think that fear was the most extreme it's ever got, and all that FUD around Epstein being Satoshi and stuff. So I think we have to at least have a good bounce here, if not maybe one more week down. But I definitely don't think crypto's dead or anything like that, like the media are trying to say.
No, definitely not. And I think that that's sort of the narrative that comes out every single time that we enter the bear market. Is always different. It's always going to be like different this time. It's always worse this time. But everyone always also says that when prices are moving up too.
Yeah, and if you have a look at some of those prices, right? Like Solana and ETH, and they've all had some pretty big drawdowns now. Even Bitcoin over 50%. So whenever you get to stock up on things down 67% that you still think are the good quality ones, then that's all good.
Yeah, well, that's kind of, I guess, where we kick off then this week as well is like exactly how low do we go? So I think I started looking around sort of general consensus about a lot of different like platforms this week, and you can kind of see the apathy that people have right now, where there's people sort of leaving the space, but it's the same story as always that these are the times where you can best position yourself. And I was talking to like our research team the other day. Part of me kind of feels a little bit of de-stress that comes in when prices are like this a little bit, because it's not just like you're on edge just waiting for like this sort of blow off top. Like this is where you can probably actually use the technology for what it was actually intended for, and you can kind of get yourself a position, get yourself familiar with all of the different like products and how you can actually use blockchain in your real life. And sort of set up your portfolio, not knowing, not relying on some massive run up.
Yeah, and for those that followed our advice, all those weeks and months I was saying, make sure you take profits when Bitcoin was above 110. Now's the time to start dollar cost averaging in, really.
Well, we'll kick off with some of the major news articles this week, and there's probably one major one which is in the way for everything, and this is this clarity bill, because I think people are starting to realize now that politicians aren't our friends, and this was really used as a tool that got the whole crypto lobby on side, and I'm guilty of this. Like I came here on the channel as well, like all excited about the fact that finally, the SEC was not going to be combative towards our industry and all this sort of stuff. But I think it's another pawn, and we've all been used in a way. And now with the Clarity Act, what they're squabbling over, and they've sort of made Coinbase the villain here, is because the banks effectively want to commandeer it, and they're trying to block stablecoins from actually eating their lunch.
Yeah, it's wolf in sheep's clothing type stuff, as always, from the people in power.
You look back on this as well, and it's kind of obvious. It's kind of obvious when you think about it. It's like, oh well, the banks are now using the thing which we were all trying to dethrone the banks with, and so you can only see that they were going to fight us as long as until they could get their own position.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think a lot of this will really play out this coming week. So that for those that are unaware, they're fighting over one main principle right here, and that is whether or not stablecoins can be allowed to actually pay a yield. And so, because the stablecoin holders are actually backing these stablecoins with treasury bills, can they pass that on to you and I? So, if we're holding stablecoins, can we earn an interest rate on it? Because if you can, there is literally no need for a bank anymore, and all of these neo banks are going to pop off everywhere. So, we'll see what we'll see what happens right here. But
It creates an
watch this mess.
interesting dynamic in the DeFi world as well, because Australia's talking about raising rates 4 times this year. So if you can get 5-6% pretty risk free in like the traditional system or even in your crypto stablecoin system, well, they're going to have high yields for the people that want to lend throughout DeFi, which again is going to create an opportunity to get maybe 10%.
Well, I mean, even now you can do some pretty interesting stablecoin liquidity provisioning and still get double-digit returns on your stablecoins. And so, like, we've got an article which is about to come out on the platform as well, which will show about how you can actually still be getting yield, not even sitting in necessarily like an altcoin, but you can be getting, some sort of stablecoin yield. And I guess risk metrics on what's the risk available to you there. Mostly, it would be smart contract risk. But the banks are going to fight this the whole way. So let's see what happens from here.
Yeah.
I think that this is mostly shaken out, to be honest. I think this is another one of the storm in the teacup type sort of thing where, like, Epstein is now Satoshi Nakamoto. Like, this is, I kind of laughed at this. And you see some of the headlines, like, Epstein's now the founder of Bitcoin, and, next week he'll be the founder of, Easter. Like, it's interesting how, like, these get used. And Bitcoin, I think, was declared the other day on the financial review that Bitcoin still has another 70,000 to go down because of its attachment to Epstein. So it just kind of shows, like, what is all of our thesis for being here? Like, why did you get into Bitcoin in the first place? And I know for me, I love the idea of the separation of the state from money. That's what we're all here for. Now, whether or not this is done and this is over now that the ETFs are the sole buyer of Bitcoin and that, it's now been commandeered. But I think that we're just having a bit of a reshuffling right now, and there's a handover of the baton to the new generation as a lot of people have sort of taken profit. But I wouldn't be stressed about this. This is not going to be the end of Bitcoin. Epstein.
No, he bought a Bitcoin for Dummies book in 2013, 14, 15. So I don't think he was the creator.
No. Now, Tom Lee, he's going to be sweating a little bit right now. So for those who don't know who he is, Tom Lee runs the biggest DAT, or digital asset treasury company, that holds Ethereum. I think he's something at nearly 4% of the total ETH supply right now, which I also don't know if is a great thing. But he's massively underwater in his positions. They were predicting sort of an ETH bounce at 2,400, which hasn't come. We're now sitting under 2K ETH. But what this does show is that I think that Ethereum, out of any other token outside of Bitcoin, probably has the most guaranteed future. The fact that most sort of tokenization platforms are now building with Ethereum, and that there is actually a native yield you can get on chain because of Ethereum, I would anticipate that just like the 4-year cycle gets memed into existence, like Ethereum's recovery will do the same thing. And so, like, when you've got bags of people who are underwater here, they're not going to let it go all the way down. And this is sort of billions of dollars of investment that will still come into the token that exactly is there, which probably for most other projects outside the top 20 is not guaranteed to be there.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me if the real powers that be that are trying to kill crypto, I don't think they can, because I just think demand's too strong globally, and they're only kind of really captured the West. But I think they want to kind of really hurt Saylor and Tom Lee and these funds. Like we spoke about a couple of years ago, when we start to see everyone doing treasuries and borrowing debt against it to buy crypto, they're going to try and wipe them out just like they've wiped out retail.
Yeah, and absolutely. It's sort of that whole restructuring of, like, let's not, the same sort of thing as that the banks were doing with Bitcoin. It's let's sell it down until we get it to a point that we're happy with, and then let's scoop it all up, and then let's tell everyone how it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
Again, Ripple is the one who is the elephant in the room here, because, you can kind of, like, what's the saying is that you should probably, when people tell you who they are, you should probably believe them. And so for all of the traders out here, XRP has been one of the sole, I guess, altcoins that did fairly well this cycle. That if you were sitting in XRP, you did have a sort of a mini bull market where you could have sold out. But for me, when you look at who's actually telling, Coinbase to hurry up and sign this deal so they can get on with it, it's XRP. They seem to be fine with this setup. So they're obviously trying to go live at the moment now to be that settlement layer that the banks would prefer to use. I think XRP is going to do very well and will be around for the next cycle. So if you are trading it, it's not a financial advice, but I do see that there's a long-term future here. But I will admit, personally, in my personal convictions, I'm not a holder.
I think it's also interesting if you look at what's happened to Binance. So they burst onto the scene and they're only trading with like Bitcoin or Tether and not really banking and stuff. And then CZ goes to jail, gets the slap on the wrist and says, you're going to start playing our game from the people that pull the strings. Now he's the vast majority holder of Trump's stablecoin. Is it USD1? And now Binance is integrating Ripple's, their ledger and their stablecoin, which is all fully compliant with banks and everything. So again, he was someone that was a bit of a cypherpunk and going against the rules to begin with. Some people say this is the market's maturing and you've got to do it, but others of us kind of want to fight for some level of freedom and privacy and stuff, right?
And like, again, why are you in blockchain? Like, what is the purpose here? If it's just purely to make money, well, like, you've probably done better in silver lately. But if you're here for actually some sort of like alternative conviction and to keep your freedom on the internet, which is what we want blockchain to be used for, well, then you need some decisions to make about what your investing strategy looks like.
Yeah.
Lastly, this was probably the biggest news from throughout the week, is that sort of MegaETH was the next, I guess, iteration of Ethereum. And this is actually quite interesting. And I was trying to find to see if there was a correlation here, because Vitalik tweeted during the week that he feels like Ethereum layer 2s can't just be a copy paste of Ethereum. They have to have some sort of point of difference. Otherwise, go back to the mainnet. And there's a lot of centralization that exists in the layer 2 space. And Vitalik is actually, to his credit, has probably been highlighting this, that now layer 2s get ranked, whether they're a stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, in their decentralization path. Most of the L2s have had struggled to get to to stage 2. It's actually quite difficult. Hardly any of them have gotten there. And so when he's now saying, let's pivot back to the mainnet, a lot of that has been around decentralization of the layer 2s. But what he did say is that they need to iterate. And so MegaETH is the one that launched this week. Now, again, like, I'm not saying to go FOMO into this token or anything like that, but when you're looking at the tools that are available, there's a lot of development that's still happening inside the Ethereum ecosystem. And this is another one now where you've got Solana-esque type sort of speed. You've got like some real like hyped up, juiced up version of Ethereum. So I would imagine that this is going to do quite well. And there's a whole bunch, like I said, there's a whole bunch of different applications inside the ecosystem. So now is the time that if you're looking for opportunities for the airdrops and the yields and the all sorts of integrations, this is probably one that will be around next cycle and has sort of just really just got themselves going.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, so I think the main thing what we've got going on right now is that we need to understand like, where do we sit right now? Where do we position ourselves for the next cycle? And moving forward, this will be the time to sort of figure out exactly what you stand for and where you want to actually sort of lock up your capital.
Yeah. And again, just for everyone at home, we are really sort of changing that service that we offer. So still trying to pick the best altcoins and portfolios and that, but we really want to offer more around like privacy and other ways to live outside the system. And yeah, we absolutely nailed that silver breakout, and we helped hopefully people take plenty of profits and nail that mid-cycle top and all that type of stuff. So it all sort of fits together in this one picture of being sovereign and being outside the system and all this type of stuff. So guys, you can head over to the website for the newsletter, our research, or our high net worth services, which have been super popular. That was probably the most fun chat we've had with everyone last month, wasn't it? But yeah, I'll speak to you again next week, mate. Take care.